Hello and welcome back to the Mojave, everybody. Welcome back to New Vegas, where today we're going to be taking a look at a Wasteland staple. This is the laser rifle, and the laser rifle has showed up in every single Fallout game so far, I believe. I haven't played 76 or Brotherhood, but I'm pretty sure the laser rifle is in both those two. It's just a staple of the Wasteland, and something that you always find. And in New Vegas, it's really no exception. It's probably going to be one of the early game laser weapons or energy weapons that you do find, because you can get these in Nipton. So there is a couple of them laying around. They're usually in pretty rough condition, but you can fix them up, and if you have weapon repair kits, then you can have an early game weapon that's pretty strong. This is probably going to be like your first full-size energy weapon, unless you find a plasma rifle first, in which case that one might be, or I guess a recharger rifle, because Chad can sell those and you can find them on Dead Blight members early on. But aside from that, laser rifle is probably going to be one of the first ones that you get. The laser rifle requires 25 energy weapons and 3 strength to wield, so it is very low strength and pretty low energy requirements too. Most builds are going to be able to use the laser rifle without too much issue, and if you're going with a dedicated energy weapon build, you're definitely going to be able to use it. This does 22 damage per shot, which is pretty decent. That's not super high, but it's not super low either. This has 68 damage per second, which is okay. Maybe not the highest, but it does have fast follow-up shots, so that's pretty good. 22 crit damage, which is fine. It's the same as its regular damage. This has a 1.5 times crit modifier, so it is more likely to hit crits than normal. This has extremely low spread at 0.025, so it is one of the more accurate weapons in the game. It's about as accurate as something like a hunting rifle is too, so that's really nice. This only costs 18 action points to use in VATS. The laser rifles are really good in VATS, so if you're going with a VATS build, then this might be an energy weapon for you. This weighs 8 weight, so it's not too heavy. Sort of heavier than other energy weapons, but not as heavy as like a recharger rifle or something. Has 125 item health, so not very high. That is something that's kind of common with energy weapons, but luckily laser rifles are very common, and you can buy quite a few of them because you can buy them from like the Silver Rush, and you can buy them from the Brotherhood super regularly. Some other vendors sometimes sell them too, so they're not impossible to find, and this one holds 24 rounds in it. For the pros of the laser rifle, this one has pretty good damage per second. This one is very accurate. It has really good ammo. The microfusion cells are really nice to use, and they are pretty flexible, and this has very low action points. So the laser rifle actually has a lot going for it. The only major con to the laser rifle is that it kind of has low item health, and that's just sort of an energy weapon problem in general, where its item health just makes it so it can break fast. But if you have, let's say, jury rigging, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Or if you can just keep buying laser rifles, not a huge deal, and they're fairly common and fairly cheap. You can also just make weapon repair kits and fix it up that way. So there are ways to circumvent this problem. It's not a massive deal for energy weapon users. There is also quite a few different ammos that you can load into this as well. You have the standard microfusion cells, which give you regular damage for the weapon, but microfusion cells always give you -2 damage threshold. So the laser rifle always has armor piercing, at least to some extent on it, which is pretty nice. You can use the bulk microfusion cells. You can buy these usually in the miscellaneous section in vendors, and you usually get quite a few of them. But these ones do 15% less damage than regular microfusion cells, but they do 15% less damage to your weapon as well, so it doesn't break as fast. It also no longer comes with the damage threshold brick, so it doesn't have armor piercing anymore either. You could go with the overcharge cells, which get you more damage on hit, but they also break your weapon quite a bit faster, so they can be worth it, but maybe not always. You can get the max cells, which give you a huge boost in damage and even more armor breaking at -10 damage threshold, so that's pretty nice. Oh, the overcharge cells are -5 too. But the max cells -10 is really good, but they do break your weapon 2.5 times faster, and since your weapon can already break pretty quick, you can break your weapon down really, really fast if you're firing through the max cells with it, but it does do a lot of damage per second. And then you have the optimized cells, which you can make if you got the Vigilant Recycler perk, and these ones are basically on par with the overcharge cells, just they don't break your weapon as fast, so they're a lot better in that regard. And usually the ammo type that I try to load into my energy weapons, just because it feels the nicest overall. There is also quite a few perks that help out with the laser rifle in general. Laser Commander is fantastic. It gives you even higher crit chance, so that's really good. The laser rifle already really likes crits, so hitting more crits is pretty good. Meltdown is also really good because it just gives you more AoE damage. You can hit multiple enemies with this, so it can be really good for cleaning up small and medium-sized enemies. Not so much against really tough enemies. It won't rip through them pretty quick or anything, but it does help. And then really any sort of VATS-related perk can also help with the laser rifle. So if you want to go with like Commando, Action Boy, or Action Girl, you could go with Math Wrath as well. Any of those help the laser rifle out quite a bit because you can just already spam this in VATS, and if you get to spam it even more, that's pretty good. So this is one of the better VATS weapons. Considering all that for the laser rifle, for a tier list ranking, I think I'd put the laser rifle up into high B tier. The regular laser rifle is pretty consistent and will be a very good early to mid game weapon for an energy weapon build. You might switch it out later, or you might not, because it does actually have a modded version and a unique version we got to talk about too. So let's talk about the modded version and all the things that you can put on this. For the different mods for the laser rifle, you can actually get 3 of these, and these go on any sort of laser rifle. You don't need like a Gunner's Arsenal version. There actually isn't one besides the Tribeam laser, which we're not going to be talking about in this video because it's different enough and it kind of acts more like a shotgun than the regular laser rifle. Regular laser rifle has 3 options, and it has a focused optic. This gives you 3 more damage, which is pretty good considering that would raise your base damage from 22 to 25. That's not bad. You also have a scope on this, which the scope gives you a 3.5 times scope. It's actually a pretty long range scope, so that's kind of nice if you want to be sniping with the laser rifle. And since the laser rifle is super accurate, it's actually a pretty decent energy weapon sniper. Maybe it's not going to be as good as like the Gauss rifle, but the Gauss rifle has really high single target damage, so that kind of makes it a better sniper rifle for general sniper purposes. But this can work really well as like a marksman rifle. I know it's kind of weird to say for like an energy weapon, but that's kind of how I see it. And then the third mod that you can put on this is a beam splitter. And the beam splitter in the regular game is kind of bugged. The way that it's supposed to work is that you now fire out 2 beams. However, these beams are basically stacked right on top of one another. So it's not like you see 2 beams go out and go into weird directions or anything. And this is supposed to give you 30% more damage because that other beam hits a little bit harder. That's how it's supposed to work, and that's how it was working with the mod that I have, but this is an unofficial patch mod that I have that actually fixes a lot of the problems in New Vegas, and it makes the weapon actually weaker than it otherwise be. In the regular game, in the vanilla game of New Vegas, if you put this on, it actually just doubles the beams, and it just gives you double damage. So doubling your damage with the laser rifle is very strong, as you would kind of imagine, especially since you get more increased damage. So suddenly your base damage went from 22 all the way up to 50 damage per shot. That's pretty good, as well as your damage per second jumped up pretty substantially from that. You're still hitting crits pretty often, you're still really good in VATS, you're still very accurate, you still have a large magazine, and that extra shot that you're firing per shot isn't breaking your weapon any faster, so it actually increased your item health too. And with the modded version of the laser rifle, at least in vanilla New Vegas, I would probably put this up into S tier. It's surprisingly good, because then it's probably like your designated, again, marksman rifle, similar to like All-American or the marksman rifle for guns. The laser rifle fills a very, very similar niche for an energy weapon build, and it's really good. It's really nice at that. So long as you can get the beam splitter and the focused optic, it's really good. Scope is completely optional. If you like the scope, then throw it on. If you don't like the scope, then don't worry about it. It's not a huge deal. There is also one, or I guess kind of 2 unique versions of the laser rifle in New Vegas. We'll go over one of them really quick because it's just the Van Graff's laser rifle, which is just a slightly weaker laser rifle than a regular laser rifle, and it's just for part of a quest. You get it during that one if you want to pick that or the plasma rifle. They're just kind of weaker versions of the laser or plasma rifle. They don't actually come up that much, and they're not really good for anything. They technically count as a quest item, so you could cheat them into like dead money. But would a laser rifle or a plasma rifle really give you that much advantage in dead money since you already have the Holo rifle? I don't think that would really help you all that much, so I would just say ignore it, and we're just not going to acknowledge it for this tier list or anything like that. We will talk about the other one, which is the AER-14 prototype laser rifle. This one you can find in Vault 22. This is the vault that has all the spore people in it and stuff. It is found at the very bottom of the vault. Well, sort of. It's found on the 4th level of the vault, but you do have to go to the 5th level and then take the stairs back up, kill some mantises, and then it's going to be found on a skeleton, which you can pick up. This one is quite a bit different than a regular laser rifle. Well, this one fires green beams rather than the red beams that a regular laser rifle does. This one also consumes double the amount of ammo per shot, so it still holds 24 rounds in the gun, but you only get 12 shots out of this, and that does make it so you're eating through ammo a little bit quicker. This one also requires 25 energy weapons to wield and 3 strength, just like a standard laser rifle. And this one does 35 damage per shot. This one does 105 damage per second, so it is more damage and more damage per second than a regular laser rifle, as you'd kind of assume, but it would still be less than like the modded laser rifle, since that one's still kind of bugged with the double beams. This one does 35 crit damage, has a 2 times crit modifier, so it's more likely to hit crits, has even less spread than the regular laser rifle at 0.0225, Why it has such a long I don't know. It doesn't really matter. They're both extremely accurate, so whichever. This one costs 20 action points to use, so a little bit more than a regular laser rifle, but it's still really good in a VATS build. This one also holds 24 rounds in it, but like I said, those are actually just 12 rounds because it takes up 2 ammo per shot. This one weighs 8.5 weight, so it's slightly heavier than a regular laser rifle. And this one has 100 item health, so it has less item health than a regular laser rifle, but you are firing out twice the amount of ammo through it, so that kind of makes sense. You're technically getting more value out of it, unless you're counting the modded version of the laser rifle, in which case you're not getting as much value out of it. This one's also pretty decent, and I would say this one is an upgrade over the regular laser rifle, but not an upgrade over the modded laser rifle. And I'd put this one up into the A tier. Pretty good weapon, and can be really useful, especially if you want to run and get it early, because it might be difficult finding some of the modded versions of the laser rifle, or at least the mods that you can find on there, because not a whole lot of people sell them. Sometimes Crimson Caravan can sell them, the Silver Rush can sell them, and the Brotherhood can sell them, and that's usually about the main ones that you're going to find selling these type of upgrades for the laser rifle. But once you do get the beam splitter on there, then the regular laser rifle kind of outperforms the other ones, so that's why it would be a little bit higher. So in conclusion, would I recommend the laser rifle? Yeah, absolutely. If you're going with an energy weapon build, really good. If you're not going with an energy weapon build, it can still be decent enough. It's going to do decent enough damage, and if you have a lot of microfusion cells, you might want to use it. I don't know if I'd recommend this over a plasma rifle, especially like the unique one. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Tribeam laser, and it's not really a unique variant, but the other option of it, the Gunner's Arsenal version of it. So the Tribeam laser is a weapon that you can find in New Vegas. It is a quite powerful weapon. It kind of always has been since Fallout 3 introduced it, and I think you can basically make a mod of it in Fallout 4. You probably can in 76 as well. In New Vegas, it is quite powerful. Not a whole lot of enemies actually carry around the Tribeam laser. There are some that do, like the Marked Men can actually have Tribeam lasers in the Divide, at least if you go there at a high level. And the Brotherhood can carry on Tribeam lasers, and they are pretty scary. This is basically 3 laser rifles taped together, or it's actually a sawed-off laser rifle that now is split into 3 beams. So that's a little bit strange, but okay. The Tribeam laser you're probably not going to be finding really early on, but there are a couple vendors that do sell this because you can get a Gunner's Arsenal version of it. So if you want to rush right to the Silver Rush, you can get one right away. If you want to rush to the Brotherhood, they can potentially sell you one, or you could take one from them. The Tribeam laser requires 75 energy weapons and 4 strength in order to wield. So pretty high energy weapons, fairly low strength like most of the energy weapons take. This one does 66 damage per shot, which is quite high. That's really high for a laser weapon. I think it's the highest per shot out of any of the laser weapons. This one does 180 damage per second, also very high, which is really good for this. This one only does 22 crit damage. The main reason why is because this is effectively 3 separate laser rifles. So if you hit with one of these, it'll be 22, but if you hit with all 3, then it will be 66 like the regular damage, so you can get even more damage from that, which is pretty awesome. The main reason why shotguns are kind of like this, or shotgun-like weapons are like this, is because in Fallout 3 they were way too overpowered because they just did way too much damage on hit with crits. They don't do so much in New Vegas, but this one is still really good for those crits. This one has a 1.5 times crit modifier, so you're more likely to hit crits than normal. That's really good. Most of the energy weapons actually have this, or at least the laser weapons do. This one costs only 23 action points, which is quite good for a shotgun. Or again, a shotgun style weapon. This doesn't technically count as a shotgun, so and Stay Back and Shotgun Surgeon won't be counting towards the damage on this, but it still functions like as a shotgun type weapon. This one also has very little spread for a shotgun at 0.5, so it is, I think, the most accurate shotgun in the game, not counting putting like slugs into the hunting shotgun, which is pretty good. That's pretty nice. This one does hold 24 rounds in it, just like a regular laser rifle. However, this does consume 3 ammo per shot, so you only get 8 shots in total, which isn't too bad for a shotgun, in all honesty. A semi-auto shotgun that holds 8 rounds is still pretty good. This one weighs 9 weight. It is heavier than a regular laser rifle. Too bad it's not an extra weight heavier, because otherwise then heavyweight would count towards it, but it sadly doesn't. And this one has a measly 50 item HP. This isn't so bad because it is eating through ammo so quick, so you don't actually go through health too fast, at least compared to the ammo, but you can break the Tribeam laser potentially really fast if you are shooting it quite a bit. For the general pros of the Tribeam laser, this one has really high damage and really high damage per second, as you would kind of expect. It's really good at close range. It's also pretty good at long range because the spread isn't that bad for a shotgun. It also has a great ammo type. The microfusion cells are fantastic. They already are pretty good, and then you can convert them into other options. You can load like max cells into this, and you will kill things really fast, but you will break your weapon really fast too, so kind of weigh that option if you want to take it. The cons to this weapon are that it has very low item health. That's just one of the big cons of the Tribeam laser. You're going to break it pretty fast. It can also go through ammo potentially pretty quick since you are consuming 3 rounds per shot, so you might want to be carrying around extra ammo for this. The other con to this is that this is fairly rare. You're probably going to have to buy a Tribeam laser, again from like the Silver Rush or the Brotherhood. You're not really going to be able to find them just laying on enemies very often unless you want to go kill the Brotherhood right away, or you want to wait till high levels and potentially farm the marked men that might have them. Marked men can have a lot of different weapons though. This is just one of the high level energy weapons. There are also quite a lot of perks that can help out with the Tribeam laser as well. Like most of these energy weapons, Meltdown is fantastic because it makes it so whenever you kill something, it just blows it up. So that can be good. You can get even more DPS out of this. You could take something like Laser Commander, which makes it so you have a higher crit chance with the Tribeam laser, which is fantastic. Any of the laser weapons really enjoy Laser Commander. You could also go with VATS perks. This one's pretty good for a VATS build. Like I said, shotgun perks don't actually help this, so you might not want to go with that. And you could also go with something like Pack Rat, just so that you can carry around more microfusion cells, assuming you're playing on the hardcore difficulty. If you're not playing on hardcore, then you won't need that one. Let's talk about the different ammos that you can load into this as well, because the microfusion cells are quite good. You have the standard microfusion cells, which just give you regular damage. However, microfusion cells, just like all the energy cells, make it so you punch through 2 armor right away. That's really nice. Gives you some level of armor breaking. Then you got the bulk cells. You can buy bulk cells from merchants all over the place. These ones give you 15% less damage per shot, but they break your weapon 15% slower. So that can be kind of nice, especially for the Tribeam laser that can eat through ammo really quick and can eat through its item health pretty quick. You have the overcharge cells. They give you more damage, give you more armor pen, but break your weapon a lot quicker. You may want to use these with the Tribeam laser, you might not want to. You got the max cells, which give you a lot more damage, a lot more armor pen, but break your weapon way faster. They can be really good in a pinch. They're really good for killing like Deathclaws and other high value targets, maybe super mutants and some of the other ones like tunnelers. They can actually be really nice to have with your weapon. I wouldn't really recommend you always be firing them through the Tribeam laser unless you're just going to be using the Tribeam laser for close range against really dangerous targets, or even medium and long range against really dangerous targets. The Tribeam laser with max cells can work really well there. And then you can also load the optimized cells into this. This gives you a little bit more damage, punches through more armor, and doesn't break your weapon as quick. I consider these ones the best to be loading into it for general purpose, but again, the max cells can be really good if you just need something for killing things at very close range with this weapon. So the Tribeam laser can be incredibly powerful, although a little bit fragile. For an overall rating on my tier list, I'd put the Tribeam laser up into A tier. I think it's pretty good overall. I think it's actually pretty nice for killing most enemies with, so long as you're okay with the item health. There is a Gunrunner's Arsenal version of this weapon that we need to talk about too. You can buy this also from the Gunrunners or from other vendors like the Silver Russian, like the Brotherhood, they might have this. The Gunrunner's Arsenal version is the exact same stat-wise as the regular Tribeam laser, like most of the Gunrunner Arsenal weapons are. But this one does get 3 mods that you can put on it, which dramatically help the Tribeam laser. So let's talk about those. The 3 that you can get are a focus optic. This gives you 3 more damage per beam, which makes you do even more damage overall. That one's pretty nice to have, although sometimes a little bit overkill on the Tribeam laser. I don't really feel a huge difference when putting that one on compared to just not having it on. So that one's not the biggest deal out of the other 2. Still nice to have, but in my opinion, the least impactful. After that, you have the heavy duty capacitor. This makes it so your item gets 200% more item HP. So you go from the 50 item HP all the way up to 150 item HP. And that's really good. The Tribeam laser tends to break itself pretty fast. If you make it so it doesn't break itself as quick, that's really, really nice to see. And then the last one is the high capacity terminal. This one increases your overall capacity from 24 rounds up to 48 rounds. And that is also cut down by 3 shots per shot. So instead of just getting 8 shots out of your rifle, you actually get 16 out of it. And a 16-shot shotgun is pretty good, especially a 16-shot long-range shotgun that has extra crits on top of it. Those ones are all fantastic to be throwing onto the Tribeam laser. And I would put this one straight up into S tier. I think it's one of the best laser weapons in the game. I think it's one of the best energy weapons in the game. I enjoy this over something like the multi-plas rifle, although the multi-plas rifle is also pretty good. We'll talk about that in a later video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the recharger rifle, which is one of the early game laser weapons, sort of. It's sort of a laser weapon. The recharger rifle could be one of the very first energy weapons that you find, as you can find this on Dead Blight members. You could also find it from vendors that might sell it, like Chet. Chet can often have a recharger rifle as well. The recharger rifle is pretty unique in that it is a weapon that does not require any sort of ammo. You just have to wait for it to charge up, and then you can fire it until it's empty, and you'll have to wait for it to charge back up again. For the base stats of the recharger rifle, this one requires 0 energy weapons and 5 strength. The strength requirement is kind of high for an energy weapon. Most energy weapons do not require 5+ strength. Some of them do, like the Gatling laser and the plasma caster, but most of them are generally around like 3 to 4 strength, so this one's a little bit heftier than others. That being said, most characters are probably going to go with 5 strength minimum or a bit higher than that, depending on what type of build or weapons you're going to be using, unless you're running a specific build. So it's by no means unreasonable. Most characters are going to be able to use this right away. This one does 12 damage per hit, which is pretty low, but it's okay for a starting weapon. This does 51 damage per second, which is okay as well. The damage per second can be good with the recharger rifle, although the practical damage per second with the recharger rifle is probably going to be lower than this, simply because you're going to fire this as many times as you can at an enemy, and then you're going to have to wait for it to recharge back up. So the damage per second is going to drop off more and more the longer the fight draws out, to where you're not going to be able to recharge this effectively, and you're probably just going to be shooting one laser at a time, waiting for it to recharge at least into the early game. This one does 12 crit damage, which is pretty low as well, but it's the same as its regular damage, which is okay. This is a 1.5 times crit chance, so it's better than average. You're more likely to hit crits, so that's kind of nice. This one costs 19 action points, which makes it fairly good for the start for a VATS build because it doesn't cost that much. This one has 0.02 spread, so it is an extremely accurate weapon, one of the most accurate weapons in the game, about on par with something like the hunting rifle, which is actually really cool. That makes it so you have a pretty reliably consistent weapon at somewhat longer ranges if you're going with an energy weapon build and you get this early. This one holds 7 shots in it, and those 7 shots will recharge, but it will cap out at 7 shots. So it can't go any higher than that, which is what makes its DPS be pretty low, because once you fire out your 7 shots, and you're going to have to wait so long for every shot to recharge after that. This one weighs a whopping 15 weight, which is really heavy. That's one of the heaviest rifles in the entire game. That's getting up there with like the 50 cal rifle and like the automatic rifle, which is pretty crazy. And this one is affected by the heavyweight perk. So if you want to carry around a recharger rifle, you could take that perk to cut its weight in half and have it go to 7.5 weight, which is still pretty hefty, especially for an energy weapon, but it's more reasonable than the 15 weight. You don't want to be carrying around multiple recharger rifles either. They are going to weigh you down a lot, and they're really not worth as much as other weapons. So kind of fix up your recharger rifles with other recharger rifles, at least into the early game. You could, of course, use them to fix other weapons if you have jury rigging later on. And then this one has 200 item health, which is pretty good for the start. That makes it so it does not break very fast. On my recent challenge run, where I was just going through and looting dead bodies and using them, or whatever they had on them as weapons, I did get a recharger rifle right at the very start, which actually saved me a ton of ammo in the early game, and made it so that my resources went much further as I progressed in that challenge. It by no means was a super strong weapon, but it was a really reliable early game weapon. Let's talk about the pros and cons to the recharger rifle, and then we'll go over some perks for it that may help it out a little bit. So for the general pros, infinite ammo is going to be the biggest pro of the recharger rifle. You never need to worry about ammo when you're carrying around the recharger weapons, which is really, really cool, especially into the early game. The only other builds that have something like that are melee and unarmed, which are really strong early game builds too, but this does make it so energy weapons has a pretty reliable option into the early game to actually just save up ammo so that they can get more energy cells for whatever their pistol is and more microfusion cells for whatever their rifle is going to be. It also has good item HP, which is really good for the start. It makes it so it doesn't break very fast, which is awesome, again, at the very start. You're not going to care about it so much later on when you can transition to other things like plasma and laser rifles, or some of the bigger weapons like the Gatling laser and the plasma caster, but in the early game, it's really nice. For the general cons of this though, low damage per second, and its weight is crazy. I don't know why it weighs so much. Weight makes it so you don't really want to be carrying around multiple of these. Carrying around one is fine though, because you're probably going to have an extra 15 weight that you can spare, at least on an energy weapon build. The low damage though, and the low damage per second really hurts as the game goes on. because you're just not going to have enough damage per second to kill things quickly. Even on like the lower difficulties, you can still struggle with the recharger rifle quite a bit. It's okay for medium-sized enemies and smaller enemies that you can pick off without too much trouble, which is why it's so good in the early game, but it falls off really hard as soon as you're out of that very early game. There are a couple of perks that do help with the recharger rifle though. You might think the laser commander would work with this weapon because it fires out lasers, but it doesn't according to the game's code, because it's not coded as a laser rifle, it's coded as a recharger rifle, so it uses recharger damage, which makes it so that laser commander does not affect it. I wish it did, because then it would get more crit chance, and that would help out at least some amount, but it doesn't, so that perk doesn't help. However, something like Meltdown does help with it, and that makes it so you can kill enemies, and when they're killed, they basically explode like a plasma grenade, and that makes it so damage per second can actually be upped quite a bit by this weapon, and it's okay for clearing up smaller crowds later on into the game. It's still not going to do amazing against big enemies, because you're still going to have to kill an enemy and then hope that that meltdown goes off and explodes, and it explodes close enough to the other enemies so that you can hurt them. But in the early game, it can actually be pretty decent, or for, again, just picking off smaller enemies like mole rats or something, it can actually be pretty decent. With all that being said though, for a rank with the recharger rifle, I would put this into F tier. It is probably one of the worst energy weapons in the game, sadly. It's really cool in the early game, and for early game, like inside Good Springs and just outside there, it would probably actually go up a little bit. It would probably actually be like a C or a D tier weapon where it's still usable. It's by no means crazy, but it can be kind of useful in that early game setting where ammo is scarce, you don't have very much money, and you just want something that has range that you can kill stuff with. It works really well then, but as soon as you move out of that and you start having like ammo for your other weapons and you start getting decent weapons, then it really doesn't have much of a niche anymore. So should you use the recharger rifle? Maybe, at least in the very early game, then potentially. If you don't find it in the early game, don't worry about it, and if you find it later on, you're probably not going to use it. So it's not one of the stronger weapons, it's probably on the weaker end of weapons, it's definitely in the bottom half of weapons, probably in the bottom 10 or 20 weapons total in the game, but still a really cool weapon, and I really like the design of the recharger rifle. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Laser RCW, one of my absolute favorite weapons in all of New Vegas, probably one of my absolute favorite weapons in all of the Fallout series. This is a laser Tommy gun, which looks just fantastic. I think it fits into Fallout really, really well. This is the very first weapon that we're going to be talking about that uses the electronic charge pack, which is probably the most rare of the energy weapon ammos that you're going to find, just because not a whole lot of weapons use it. It's like this and the Gatling laser and the Tesla cannons, and I think that's about it. Well, I think the Arc Welder also uses it, so there's another one. This one might be the very first one you find out of those, though. You could potentially get like the unique Tesla cannon before this, because it's down south in New Vegas, so you could get that. But these ones you're probably going to be finding towards the mid-game once you're actually getting to New Vegas, because the Fiends can have these, they can have them pretty regularly. They're the main ones that are going to have this. There are a couple other enemies that can have RCWs, but they're not super common. The Laser RCW requires 50 energy weapons and 4 strength, so not too much energy weapons and pretty low strength like most energy weapons do. This one deals 15 damage per shot, which is fine for a weapon like this. This one does 135 damage per second, which is pretty good. Full auto weapons tend to have a lot of DPS. This one does 15 crit damage, same as its regular damage, has a whopping 0.05 times chance to crit, so crits are not going to be happening too often. However, you can get a perk like Laser Commander, which does make it so crits with laser weapons are a bit easier, so that's kind of nice. This will only cost 20 action points to be using in VATS. It's surprisingly low for a full auto weapon. Most full auto weapons actually take quite a bit more than this, so it works pretty well in the VATS build. This has a 0.08 spread on it, which is very accurate. That's almost as accurate as any of the lever action rifles like the Cowboy Repeater, the Trail Carbine, or the Brush Gun. It's only slightly less accurate than them, but those are all lever action guns that have really high accuracy. This is a full auto gun and actually has really high accuracy too. This is probably the most accurate full auto weapon, or one of the most accurate full auto weapons in the game. This has a 60 round magazine, weighs 4 weight, so it's not that heavy, and has 400 item health. Which 400 item health might seem like a lot, but it's honestly not very much for a weapon like this, because it can chew through ammo fairly fast, and it can also chew through the gun pretty quick, especially if you're using some of the other ammunitions that you can load into this. For the pros of the RCW, this one does have really high damage per second, which is fantastic. You can kill things really quick with this. It has very high accuracy for a full auto weapon. Like I said, it's probably the most accurate full auto weapon in the game, so that's really cool. And this one has a high magazine capacity, so you don't really have to worry about running out of ammo too fast with this. This doesn't chew through ammo as quick as some of the other weapons in the game, but it still eats through it kind of quick, but with the magazine size, it's not super fast compared to other full auto weapons. For the cons of this weapon though, it does do low damage per shot, so it's not necessarily the best against armored enemies, and it can have ammo issues. Like I said, this can chew through ammo, but the main issue you might run into is that the electronic charge packs are just not very common in the game. You can't really buy a whole lot of them, besides from like the Great Khans. They're like the only ones that actually sell a decent amount of this. Maybe the Brotherhood does too, I honestly haven't checked them. But other vendors like the Silver Rush tend not to sell very many. You really can't buy them from like the gun runners. Other vendors tend not to sell them either, so they're a little bit awkward to come by. There's a couple different ammos that you can load into this weapon. You have the standard electronic charge pack, or the EPC rounds. These ones are the most common round that you're probably going to find, and they do flat damage. They do ignore 2 armor, just like all the energy weapon rounds, which is pretty cool. There's bulk cells, which no longer ignore armor, and they also reduce your damage, both towards your weapon and towards the enemy. So you get 15% less damage per shot, but it's also breaking your weapon 15% slower. The bulk rounds can be pretty nice if you find a bunch of them, and the Laser RCW can make pretty good use of this, especially if you're not fighting armored enemies. There is the overclocked rounds, which make it so you have even more armor piercing, even more damage, but it breaks your weapon faster. These ones can be kind of rough to throw into your weapon, because breaking your weapon can be really bad for a weapon like this. You have the max cells, which make it so you do even more damage, have even more armor piercing, and break your weapon like 2.5 times faster. I wouldn't really recommend you load those into Laser RCW unless you just want to shred something big right away with it, or you're doing like a Laser RCW only run throughout New Vegas, in which case then by all means do that. But they can break your gun really fast. And then you also have the optimized cells, which you have to get from the Vigilant Recycler perk, and these ones get you more damage. They make it so you break through more armor, the same as the overcharge cells, but they break your gun only 10% faster. These ones are the ones that I'd recommend that you load into your weapon the majority of the time. Either them, the bulk cells, or the regular cells. I think they're going to give you the most longevity out of your gun. Unless, again, there is something really big and scary and you need to throw in the max cells and shoot them. In which case, then that one can be good too. For a rating on my tier list for the Laser RCW, I don't think I can put this one any higher than B tier. It's a really cool weapon and I really enjoy it, but it's by no means overpowered or anything. It's just all around pretty solid. It's really good at close and medium range. It can be pretty decent with certain perks, which we'll talk about here in a second. And its one mod can also help it, which we'll talk about now. This does have one mod to it, and that is a recycler. And the recycler makes it so that every 4th shot that you fire from the weapon is actually refunded back to you. So you can get more ammo overall and more longevity out of your gun from this. And that does really help with the electronic charge packs because they can be kind of a pain to find. Some of the other perks that do help with this, I mentioned Laser Commander earlier, and Laser Commander is a great perk to have with the Laser RCW. It makes it so you can hit crits more often. That's pretty nice. If you're running the Laser RCW, you're probably also going to be running other energy weapons, probably like the laser rifle, the Tribeam laser, so it can really help with that build. You can also run Meltdown with this if you want a little bit more crowd control. That way, anytime that you kill something, there's a chance that it just explodes and deals damage to everything else around it. This can be really good against non-armored enemies since you can trigger this multiple times and you can get even more damage from this. The Laser RCW is pretty good for just picking off enemies quickly and efficiently, so long as they don't have armor. There is no unique version of the Laser RCW either. It is only just the regular version of it. There's just the one mod for it as well. That doesn't really change that much, which is why I wouldn't really place it anywhere else in the tier list. I think a solid B tier is where it stays. This weapon can be really good, and it's basically the energy weapon submachine gun, or at least one of the energy submachine guns. So if you're running an energy weapon build, I would highly recommend that you try this one out. It is super fun. Today we're going to be talking about the LAER and its unique variant. This is a very unique weapon that you can find in the Old World Blues DLC. This one is one of the premier energy weapons of that DLC, which that DLC actually has quite a few energy weapons. So the LAER functions somewhat similar to the laser rifle, although it does have a much slower rate of fire than something like the laser rifle. The regular LAER can be found across Old World Blues, as well as you can buy it from the Sync. The Sync sells this, so you can always get one of these, which is pretty nice. This one requires 75 energy weapons and 4 strength in order to wield, so fairly high energy weapons but low strength, which is awesome. This one does 65 damage per shot, which is quite high, 163 damage per second. Even though this one does shoot slower than a laser rifle, it still shoots fairly fast compared to other weapons, and it has really high damage per second because of that. This one only does 15 crit damage. For some reason, the LAER actually does vastly reduced crit damage compared to its regular damage. I don't think that's necessarily a problem though, because it already has pretty high base damage and pretty high damage per second, so hitting extra crit damage on top of that would make this already pretty crazy weapon even more insane. This has a 1.5 times crit modifier though, so it has an increased chance of hitting crits, which is good. This one costs 32 action points to use in VATS, making it a decent action point option. It's not one of the best for energy weapons. There are some other ones, but this one isn't bad. This one holds 20 rounds in it. This has 0.08 spread. It actually is quite accurate. That's a little bit less accurate than some of the other laser weapons, but it's still quite accurate compared to other guns. Sometimes I have noticed the laser just goes off though, for some reason. It just goes completely off of center. I don't know why that is. It's just some sort of variation with some of the laser weapons like this one. This one weighs 4 weight, so it is very lightweight, and this one has 75 item health, so very low item HP. For the pros of the LAER and its unique variant, this one has really high damage and really high damage per second. This is fantastic for an energy weapon build. It just kills through just about everything really fast, and it has a great ammo. Microfusion cells are fantastic. They're also a very common ammo, so that's really good. The major cons to this weapon are the low crits. Having only 15 crit damage on both the regular one and the unique one kind of sucks compared to other energy weapons. It's not the worst, but it is a downside to the weapon. And the major con to this weapon is that it has very low item HP. Both this one and the unique one have very low item HP and can break really fast. Even more so if you want to load in something like the max cells, which we can talk about the ammos here in a second. But if you load that in, it's going to break really quick, which is a little bit annoying. There are some perks that help out with these though. There's 2 in particular that I'd like to talk about. One is Laser Commander. Laser Commander works for this because this does count as a laser weapon, which makes it so you're more likely to hit crits. That is pretty good for this particular weapon, even though it can hit crits pretty often. Making sure that you hit crits even more often is always good, even if those crits aren't the strongest. And Meltdown is really good for just having extra crowd control, since you can kill an enemy and have it blow up and deal damage to other nearby enemies. That one's always nice on any sort of energy weapon build, so long as you're not standing too close to them, because the explosion can hurt you too. 4 different ammos. We have the regular microfusion cells that you can load into this, which do regular damage but punch through some armor, which is pretty nice. Bulk cells, which make it so you don't have any armor breaking, but they do less damage, and they do less damage to your gun. These can be okay, but I really wouldn't be using them in the LAER. You have the overcharge cells. These ones deal more damage, punch through more armor, but break your weapon a bit faster. Max cells, which do the maximum amount of damage, punch through the most armor, but also break your weapon incredibly fast, even more so with the LAER. This can be a tempting option to carry these around, because the LAER does have such high damage and damage per second that if you load these in, it can deal even more damage and damage per second. So it can be really good if you're fighting things like Death Claws or any of the big scary enemies, but you don't want to be loading them in regularly into the LAER if you plan on using this as your general purpose weapon. If you want to do that, I'd recommend the last cells, which are the optimized cells. These ones give you more damage, more armor breaking, and break your weapon only slightly faster. I think those ones are the best option overall for the LAER if you want to be using it as a general purpose weapon, but it's not a bad thing to be carrying around max cells so that you can kill those big enemies a little bit quicker. For an overall rating for the base LAER, I'm actually pretty tempted just to put this one up into S tier. I think it's really good by itself. It's a very strong weapon. It doesn't really have much of a downside besides it breaking fast, and if you have weapon repair kits, you don't really have to worry about that. If you have jury rigging, you also don't really have to worry about that, or just an excess of money to where you can just keep buying these from the sink. You could also fix them up that way. That's the only real major downside to this. The LAER also has 2 mods that you can get. You can get these in Old World Blues, and you can attach them to your weapon. You will need to buy them from the sink, but you can buy an unlimited amount of them in the sink, just like the regular LAERs. So you have the auxiliary recharger chip. This one recycles 1 round for every 4 shots, so you get ammo back every time you're using it. That's kind of nice, but not really necessary for a weapon like this. You're usually not running out of microfusion cells, but I mean, this just makes it so they go further, so it's nothing but a bonus. And then you also have the prismatic lens. This one splits your beam into 3 beams that increase your total amount of damage by 30%. At least that's what it says in the wiki. In-game, you just see it multiplied by 2, which is kind of strange, by like 2 beams. And I think that this one is bugged similar to how the laser rifle's beam splitter is also bugged, to where it's supposed to give you a second beam that gives you 30% more damage. That's not the case though. It actually just gives you a second beam, and I believe it's the same way on the LAER, to where you just get a second beam for just double the amount of damage for no reason. So that's even stronger and makes this a really strong weapon overall. Definitely mod this one out, at least with the prismatic lens. And I would put this one also up in S tier. The modified version is even better than the regular version. And now we also have the unique version to talk about too, which is Elijah's LAER. And this one, you can find 2 of these laying around in Old World Blues, and you can take both of these if you would like. This is a gun from Elijah that was modified while he was in Big Mountain. He has this one there and the Tesla cannon, interestingly enough, so you can get both of them while you're there. This one requires 75 energy weapons and 4 strength in order to wield as well. This one does 65 damage on hit, same as the regular LAER, but it has slightly higher DPS at 179, so it attacks a little bit quicker than the regular one. Still the same 15 crit damage, the same 1.5 times crit modifier, the same 32 action points, the same spread at 0.8. This one only holds 15 rounds in the magazine though, so it holds 5 less than the regular LAER. Still weighs 408, and this one has less item health than the regular LAER at 50 rather than 75. So this one breaks even faster. It can actually break incredibly quick. This one you could honestly say is just a downgrade from the LAER, because it does have a slightly faster rate of fire, but it has less ammo overall and it has less health overall, and that's going to be like the major con towards this weapon. So I'm still going to put this one up into S tier, but it is slightly weaker than the regular LAER just overall. I don't know why that is. You feel like it would do something else, and it sort of does with the fast rate of fire, and that doesn't matter too much when you're comparing the two of them. Elijah's LAER is also unique in a different way though, and that is that you can also modify this one too. So if you want to put the auxiliary recharger chip and the prismatic lens onto Elijah's LAER, you can absolutely do that, and it will just be as strong as a regular LAER, just with less item HP, slightly higher rate of fire, and less ammo overall. Still potentially a downgrade from just the modified LAER, so I'm also going to say the modded version of this is also up into S tier. These weapons are quite strong. They're some of the best energy weapons in the game. Definitely some of the best energy rifles in the game. I don't always use the LAER. I actually don't use it very often at all, because most of the time I'll use like the modded laser rifle, or I'll use the unique plasma rifle as like a general purpose weapon. And then if I want a heavy damaging weapon similar to the LAER, I usually end up going with the Gauss rifle. But whenever I have used the LAERs, they are very powerful too. Today we're going to be taking a look at an iconic weapon in Fallout. This is going to be the Plasma Rifle and the Plasma Rifle family, of which we actually have 5 of these to talk about, so there's quite a few of them. The Plasma Rifle can be earned fairly early on into New Vegas. You can actually get the unique one right away if you know where to go. It's really easy to get it, so that's really cool. Aside from that, you could also pick these up in a couple of places. You could rush to the Silver Rush and buy these. Certain other merchants can sell them. The Brotherhood can sell them. The Brotherhood can also carry these. Fiends can carry these, so you can potentially kill fiends and take them off of them. So there is quite a few different ways of getting plasma rifles fairly early on into the game. As for the stats of the plasma rifle, this one requires 25 energy weapons and 3 strength in order to wield. Pretty low requirements overall, which is awesome for an energy weapon build. This one does 47 damage per shot, which is fairly high, 66 damage per second. The plasma rifle doesn't shoot incredibly fast, as well as you do have to wait for the projectile to hit. That's kind of just a drawback with plasma in general. This one does 47 crit damage, so it has good crit damage. This one has a 2 times crit modifier, so it's more likely to hit crits, which is awesome. This one actually has very little spread at 0.2. The plasma rifle is surprisingly accurate at times, as well as the plasma shot is a little bit wider than other regular bullets, so it's a little bit easier to hit targets with this. This one has a magazine of 24, however, since it is a plasma weapon, this takes 2 ammo every time that you shoot it, so it actually only has 12 shots in total before you have to reload, which does mean you're going to go through microfusion cells a little bit quicker than you otherwise would. This one costs 30 action points, so it's okay in VATS, not as good as something like the laser rifle, which we've talked about before. That one's much better for a VATS build than the plasma rifle is, but this one's still okay. This one weighs 8, so it is okay on the weight. It's not super heavy, but it's not super light either. And the plasma rifle has 75 health. Unfortunately, like most energy weapons, this one does not have a whole lot of health, so it can break pretty quick. For the general pros of the plasma rifle, this one does do pretty high damage, which is nice, and its damage per second is decent. This one has a great ammo. Microfusion cells are fantastic. They're one of the best energy cells in the entire game, probably one of the most flexible ones, and they go to so many different weapons. And this weapon does have good crits. With the extra crit chance and doing decent crit damage, you can at least rack up a decent amount of damage thanks to the plasma rifle. For the cons of this weapon, it kind of has 2 cons that are just inherent to plasma weapons. One is that it has low item HP. This breaks fairly fast. That's kind of a problem with most energy weapons though, so weapon repair kits can be really useful, jury rigging can be super useful. just anything like that. Getting this fixed up from vendors can be useful. And this has a slow-moving projectile. If the enemy is at really long range, sometimes it's pretty difficult to hit them with the plasma rifle just because you have to wait for the projectile to actually get there. And sometimes enemies move a little bit erratically in New Vegas, so it's sometimes difficult just to hit them. There are a couple of perks that can help out with the plasma rifle too. Two in particular with plasma spaz, cutting down on the action point cost, which can be pretty nice. It can be more useful for like the unique version of this, but even the regular version can make some use of this, as well as regular VATS perks can kind of help here. Meltdown is also fantastic for this weapon and most energy weapons, where if you kill something, it explodes and deals damage to everything around it. More AoE and more value per bullet, so that's also really good. There are also quite a few ammo options that you get with the plasma rifle. Since this one uses microfusion cells, they are quite flexible. You have the regular microfusion cells, which break through 2 armor and just do standard damage. That's really nice. You have bulk cells, which don't break armor, but they don't break your gun very quick. They don't do as much damage either, so they can be kind of useful, especially if you get these early on. And same goes with most energy weapons. They can be pretty nice if you load them in. Overcharged cells to do more damage, but they break your gun a bit quicker. Max cells to do the maximum amount of damage and the maximum amount of armor breaking, but they also break your weapon way fast. That one's difficult to recommend for the plasma rifle. It's pretty good in the multi-plasma rifle, which we'll talk about later, but in the regular plasma rifle, I would avoid using the max cells. And then we also have the optimized cells, which you can get from the perk Vigilant Recycler. These ones do more damage, punch through more armor, but break your weapon slightly faster. These ones are the best ones, I would say, especially if you're going to load into the plasma rifle, because the plasma rifle is kind of a general purpose weapon overall. For an overall rating on my tier list, I'd put the plasma rifle up into B tier. I think it's a solid enough energy weapon. It's got some flaws, and I wouldn't use it over the laser rifle. The laser rifle is also better modded than this one. I don't think you're going to be disappointed in the plasma rifle if you like energy weapons. Let's move on to the modded version of the plasma rifle, because it only gets one mod, and this doesn't change it up dramatically, but it does help it. The one mod that you can put on the plasma rifle is a plasma rifle mag accelerator. This one just increases the projectile speed of those plasma shots by 200%. That's actually pretty nice. That does help it quite a bit. That makes it so long range is more viable than it would be otherwise. At close and medium range, you're not going to notice too much of a difference. It does kind of help at medium range, but at close range, it's basically neglectable because you're not going to really care if you hit something a second faster most of the time, unless maybe it's a Deathclaw or something, then it might make you feel a little bit better. So the accelerator is actually pretty nice to have on this. You can buy this from certain vendors. Traveling merchants can sometimes have this. The 188 can sometimes have this, I believe, and you can also get it from like the Silver Rush. The Silver Rush and the Brotherhood are probably going to be your main sources for energy weapon upgrades. So check them, see if you can get this. This is a nice quality of life improvement to the plasma rifle, but I don't think it makes it that much better than the base plasma rifle. So I'd still keep this one into B tier, but it is higher up in B tier than it would be otherwise. And then there is also one other plasma rifle that we should talk about, which is, I guess, technically one of the unique versions of the plasma rifle. This is the Van Graff's plasma rifle. This one is basically the same as a regular plasma rifle. It's really only used in one quest. This is if you're working with the Silver Rush and you choose to use the plasma rifle over the laser rifle. It's the same thing with the laser rifle there. And it isn't really any better than a regular plasma rifle, but it is technically a different rifle that you can get. So I'm also going to throw this one up into B tier. I don't think we really need to talk about it since it's got basically the same stats and it's, for all intents and purposes, the same weapon as a regular plasma rifle, just different in name. So let's move over to the other unique plasma rifle, which is called the Q35 Matter Modulator. You can get this one at the RepCon HQ. So if you know where that is and you know a way to get there, which is actually pretty easy, if you just run right from Good Springs up through Sloan and then up around Big Mountain, that way you can avoid the super mutants and you can avoid the Deathclaws, and then you come out on the other side, you'll actually land basically right on the RepCon HQ. It's just a little ways off to your right hand side there. So you can get this within the first couple minutes of the game. If you go in there, you don't even need to have high skills in order to get this, because you could get this with high lockpicking. It is behind a very hard locked door. However, that's not necessary, because you could also pass a few skill checks when talking to the robots and get up to the 3rd floor and then drop your way down. Or you could potentially kill the robots, drop your way down and get them. Or you could just talk to the main robot and go through the tour there, which means you don't actually need to do anything. You just have to wait for him to show you everything. Then you can go to the 3rd floor, drop down, and get this weapon right away, which is insanely strong for how early you can get this. For the stats of this weapon, this one requires 25 energy weapons and 3 strength, same as a regular plasma rifle, which is very obtainable right at the very start of the game, especially if you just tag energy weapons. You should be able to get and use this at its full capability at like level 1 if you're going with an energy weapon character, which is pretty awesome. This does 40 damage per shot, which isn't as high as the regular plasma rifle. However, this one is better than a regular plasma rifle shot for shot because this one doesn't consume 2 ammo every time you shoot it. So it's actually stronger with the amount of ammo you consume than a regular plasma rifle, even though the regular one can hit harder shot for shot slightly. This one does have higher DPS though, you can shoot it out much faster. This one has 96 damage per second, which is quite good. This one has 62 crit damage, which is very nice. Higher crit damage than it has regular damage is always a cool thing to see. Still has the 2 times crit modifier, which makes it fantastic for a crits build. This one has the same spread, so it's 0.2. Quite accurate. This one has a magazine of 12, but this only consumes 1 shot per cell. So you're going to get more damage overall from the Q35 than you would the regular plasma rifle, which is awesome. This one costs 28 action points to be using in VATS, so it's better than a regular plasma rifle in VATS. It's still not as good as like the laser rifles, but it's not bad. This one weighs 7, so it's slightly lighter, which is good. And this one has a whopping 250 item health, which doesn't really sound all that crazy compared to like ballistic guns, but it is really crazy for energy weapons. Most energy weapons have very low item HP. This one actually has quite high item HP, making it so that it breaks very slowly, which is a huge plus for a unique weapon, especially a unique weapon that you can get this early on. So the Q35 actually has a lot going for it right at the start, especially for an energy weapon build. Even if you're not going with an energy weapon build, it's still totally worth running to the Repcon HQ and grabbing this one, because there's also a lot of microfusion cells around there. So if you pick up all those, pick up this weapon, you should be good to go for most of the game, even if you're not speccing into energy weapons at all. This one I think is one of the best general purpose energy weapons in the game, and I would put this one all the way up into S tier on my tier list. I think it's fantastic. It's probably one of my favorite of the energy weapons as well. And then we also have one last plasma rifle to go over, and this is the multi-plas rifle. Multi-plas rifles are fairly rare. I think the only characters that can really carry this are the Brotherhood members. I don't remember if the Marked Men can, they might be able to, and the trauma suits in Old World Blues at certain high levels. So the multi-plas rifle is essentially 3 plasma rifles all strapped together, similar to the Tribeam laser with the laser rifle. There is also one place that I know you can get a multi-plas rifle right at the very start if you want to, and that is in the New Vegas sewers. If you go down there, there is one that is just laying on the ground, I believe, or it's on a corpse, or next to a corpse. It's one of those 3. You can pick it up off there, and you can actually start out with this one really early on if you want to rush that. So this one requires 50 energy weapons and 4 strength, a little bit more than a regular plasma rifle, but not very much requirements at all, so that's pretty awesome. This one does 105 damage per shot. Since this one fires out 3 projectiles, that's split amongst those 3 projectiles. This one also has 105 damage per second. This one does shoot slower than the regular plasma rifle, and certainly slower than the unique version of it. This one does 34 crit damage on hit. That's because it's a shotgun, so you do less damage on crit, but you hit with more crits, so it's just a way to balance out shotguns. And since that's kind of a holdover problem from Fallout 3, this one has a 1 times crit modifier, so it's less likely to hit crits, which I think is fine for a shotgun. That's perfectly okay. This one does have quite a bit more spread at 1.5, so it's not as accurate, and you can sometimes see the 3 shots going off quite a bit. Most of the time they actually stay fairly accurate, and most of the time stay pretty close to one another, so they might seem clustered. Every once in a while, though, you might get, like 2 shots that kind of go out wide, or a little bit higher low. So the spread gets worse at longer ranges, as you would kind of expect for a shotgun style weapon. This one holds 30 rounds in it, but it does consume 3 ammo every time that you shoot it, so it only has 10 shots in total before you do need to reload this. This one costs 35 action points in order to use, which is fairly high, but not too bad for a shotgun, I guess. This one weighs 708, same weight as the unique plasma rifle for some reason, I don't know why that is, and this one only has 50 item HP. This one can break really fast. Like I said earlier, you can load this up with max cells and do really high damage, similar to what you can do with the Tribeam laser. I think the Tribeam laser is a little bit better than the multi-plas rifle for the same sort of shotgun energy weapon build, but this one is still quite good and it's very fun to use. So I'd put the multi-plas rifle up into A tier. It's a very solid weapon overall. So that'll do it for the plasma rifles. Tell me your thoughts on these weapons. Do you like these weapons or the laser weapons more? Today we're going to be taking a look at the Holo rifle. This is by far one of the most requested weapons that we've had for this list, and I can understand why the Holo rifle is a really cool weapon. I was debating whether to put the Holo rifle and the grenade launcher in the same list, or at least in the same video, but they're both very different weapons even though they use the same model. The Holo rifle is modeled after the grenade launcher, although it does have a slightly different reload animation because you see your person loading in microfusion cells, and it obviously looks different because of like the scope and the extra attachments that Elijah has already put on this. The Holo rifle is going to be your first weapon that you get in Dead Money because it is the weapon that Elijah gives you, and it is a very strong weapon, especially if you're going with an energy weapons build, because it has really good stats all across the board, and it can disintegrate the various ghost people, which is very useful. There is only one Holo rifle in the entire game, and that is from Dead Money. That is the only way that you can get this, is by going there and, well, just starting up the quest, you're going to get it. So this weapon's already pretty unique. Let's talk about the base stats of it and go over some pros and cons. For the base stats, the Holo rifle requires 50 energy weapons and 4 strength to wield, which isn't a whole lot. You can technically run to Dead Money at any point during the game, so as soon as you leave Good Springs, you could actually go right there and start it up, and you may not be able to hit these requirements. You still potentially could if you're going with an energy weapon build, because you can actually still have a decent amount of like perception and tag energy weapons and at least be able to do it. 4 strength isn't that difficult to get either. I feel like most characters are going to run that. This one does 80 damage per shot. However, it also does an additional 15 damage over 3 seconds. So this will tick 3 times, dealing even more damage. This one does 89 damage per second plus those 15 damage hits every second. So its damage per second can actually be higher than this. It's kind of weird to calculate DPS for a weapon that deals damage over time. This has 80 crit damage on it, which is very high. That's a really high amount of crit damage. It already has really high regular damage, so if you hit crits, that's even better. This does only have a 1x crit modifier, so nothing crazy there, just standard crits. This costs 30 action points to fire, which is actually not that bad for a weapon like this, where it's more of like an energy weapon sniper rifle. 30 action points is still okay for that type of weapon. This one has 0.4 spread, so it's pretty accurate, although the spread doesn't tell you the whole picture because the projectile is larger than normal projectiles. Think of it similar to like the plasma shot, where the plasma shot definitely has a bigger hitbox than something like the lasers do. So spread is really good, and it's pretty accurate most of the time. And this one holds 4 rounds in it by default, same as a regular grenade launcher, and it does kind of have the same reload speed as a grenade launcher, so it's still fairly slow. You have to load these in one at a time, but you can cancel that whenever you would like, so that's kind of nice. This weighs 8 weight, so a little bit on the heftier side, but not too unwieldy. And this one has 100 item HP, meaning that it can break sort of quick, similar to like the hunting rifle that we talked about not too long ago. You're probably not going to be shooting this a whole lot because you won't need to. It fills the same type of role. It's your sniper energy weapon, and the item health doesn't matter too much, with the exception that the Holo rifle cannot be fixed by any other means other than weapon repair kits, because even if you have a perk like jury rigging, there's nothing that fixes up the Holo rifle. So weapon repair kits are your only way to make it. That being said, though, you can make an infinite amount of weapon repair kits throughout the game. You just need the resources, and I believe 50 repair to actually make those on a workbench. So be on the lookout for scrap metal, scrap electronics, duct tape, and wrenches. That way you can keep this thing fixed up. Or you don't even need to with the modded version. We'll talk about that in just one second. Let's go over the pros and cons to this weapon. For general pros, this one has really high damage per shot. That is very, very nice about it. It is kind of one of the few energy snipers, so it has very long range. This has a great ammo type because it uses microfusion cells, so you can have some really strong builds for that. And what I alluded to with the modded version is that this thing is unbreakable with the modded version, at least if you're playing the vanilla game, because it is bugged and actually makes it so your weapon is unbreakable once you attach one of its mods. For the general cons of this weapon though, it does have a slow reload. Reload's not very quick. Even with like rapid reload, it's still kind of slow since you have to reload each round one at a time. You only get 4 shots. So you're going to have to be reloading this thing fairly often, and you still have the pump animation before you can actually shoot. And it has kind of a slow rate of fire, so follow-up shots aren't super quick, and if enemies are getting close, this one can still work, but it's still going to be kind of awkward, similar to something like the hunting rifle, where at close range it just doesn't work as well as a faster weapon would. Now let's talk about ammo for this weapon, where you have 5 different options for ammo. You have the standard microfusion cells, which give you the standard amount of damage. However, microfusion cells by default already ignore 2 armor, or 2 damage threshold, so that is really nice. You actually already have kind of armor piercing on your base rounds. You also have bulk ammunition. Bulk ammunition you do buy in bulk from various merchants, and this one makes it so you do a little bit less damage. You do 15% less damage per shot. You also don't have your damage threshold break anymore, so it's just the standard, and this does break your weapon slightly slower, so your weapon lasts 15% longer, which can actually be really good on certain energy weapons. The Holo rifle doesn't necessarily need it, because again, you're probably not going to be using it super often, so I wouldn't really say loading the bulk cells into this would make a whole lot of difference overall compared to just regular ammo or some of the other options. Then we have optimized cells. Optimized cells you can make on workbenches so long as you have the Vigilant Recycler perk. And this one makes it so you do 30% more damage per shot. You have -5 damage threshold, so you punch through even more armor, but it does break your weapon 10% faster. These ones are really, really good and definitely a reason to take Vigilant Recycler because it's just a super nice ammo type that has almost no downsides to it. Slightly breaking your weapon a little bit quicker doesn't really matter a lot of the time. Overcharged cells give you 25% more damage. They also punch through 5 armor, but they break your weapon 50% faster, so that does make a little bit more of a difference. And if you have optimized cells, you might as well use those over the overcharged cells because they're just stronger. And then you also have the max cells, which give you 50% more damage, give you -10 damage threshold towards enemies, but they do break your gun 250% faster, which could be an issue and kind of is with certain energy weapons. The Holo rifle is not one of them once you have the modded version of it though, because it is unbreakable. So this has no downside to it whatsoever. It would just be 50% more damage and -10 damage threshold. So you get armor piercing rounds almost mixed with hollow point rounds too. That is really, really good for this weapon. For an overall rating for the standard Holo rifle, I would probably put it up into A tier. It's a very solid weapon that works really well as an energy weapon sniper. May get outcompeted by the Gauss rifle, but honestly at that point it's kind of personal preference where their damages are going to be fairly similar to one another. And just depends on what you like. The Holo rifle is a lot more ammo efficient than the Gauss rifle too, so that kind of helps it. And I guess the scope is also a night vision scope, so if you like that, you can count that as a pro too. We do have to talk about the modded version of the Holo rifle though too, and the modded version gets 3 different mods. You do have to get these while you're in Dead Money, and you can only get them while you're in Dead Money because once you complete that DLC, you can't go back anywhere else. You are just done, and certain sections actually get cut off throughout the quests anyway, so you do have to make sure that you get these when you have them, when they're available to you. Otherwise you'll miss out on them and you can never get them again. If you do get these, then you just have to find one of the kiosks, the vendors there, and then you'll have to buy these for the amount of tokens that they require. For upgrades, you can get a focus optic. This gives you plus 25 more base damage, which is a huge bonus in damage, so you go from 80 base damage up to 105 base damage plus the 15 damage over time with the 3-second timer on it, so you get even more damage there, and that actually makes it really comparable to something like the Gauss rifle. You can get the advanced calibration, which reduces your spread even further, so you go from 0.4 spread to 0.15 spread, making it one of the most accurate energy weapons and just a really accurate weapon in general, which is really awesome for something like an energy weapon sniper like this. And then the big one is the reinforced components. This one is supposed to give your weapon 50% more health overall, but it is bugged, at least in the vanilla game, and it actually makes it so your weapon becomes unbreakable. So you can still fix up your weapon up to 100%, but it won't ever drop from there, making it really, really strong, especially since then you can put max cells in this. And like we said, that's just 50% more damage and -10 armor to anything that you're fighting. That is really, really strong against basically everything. And the modded version of the Holo rifle, I would actually put up in S tier. The fact that it's unbreakable definitely carries it up to there. If it didn't have that and it was back to the normal amount of health, you could still argue it up into S tier, because it is, I would say, just on par with the Gauss rifle, and the Gauss rifle is really, really strong too. It's totally just personal preference at that point as to which one you enjoy more, which one you like the looks of more. The Holo rifle is super unique. And if you could get past the part where even if the health didn't matter and you just had to use weapon repair kits, I could still see it being argued up into an S tier weapon because it is really, really nice. Do you want a 50 cal, but you want it to be an energy weapon? Well, we got just the weapon for you today. Welcome back to the Wasteland. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Gauss rifle and the unique version of the Gauss rifle. The Gauss rifle has appeared in multiple Fallout games as of right now. I think it's appeared in every single Fallout game besides the very first one. It was in Fallout 2, it's in Fallout Tactics, there's actually multiple versions of it in Fallout Tactics, or at least multiple Gauss weapons. It was in Fallout 3, at least as a DLC weapon, it's in New Vegas, and it's also in 4. It should also probably be in 76, I would imagine. So, the Gauss rifle is the big bad sniper rifle for energy weapons. And some might argue this to be the best sniper rifle in the entire game, because it is quite strong. The only people that actually have Gauss rifles are generally the Brotherhood and the trauma suits that you can find in Big Mountain. And the trauma suits will only have these, I think, once you're level 20 to 30. Or higher than that. And the Gauss rifle is a very scary weapon when it's being wielded at you or when you're wielding it. The Gauss rifle is also an extremely rare weapon, so you're probably gonna have to buy this or take it off of somebody that has it. The Gauss rifle requires 75 energy weapons and 5 strength to wield, which is actually not very high requirements for one of the most powerful weapons in the game. I would think that the Gauss rifle should have 100 energy weapons to use it, but it just doesn't, so that's pretty cool, and 5 strength is very manageable on just about any character. Technically, that's a little bit high for energy weapons, but not by that much. Especially if you're counting the heavy energy weapons, then it's really not super high. This does 120 damage on shot, so quite a lot of damage. It says it has 360 damage per second. However, this is a little bit unlikely because once you fire the Gauss rifle, you will have to reload it immediately afterwards. So you will have to go through the full reload animation in order to shoot this, which makes it so its DPS is likely a little bit less than this. It's not that much less, at least in terms of the rate of fire, than something like the anti-material rifle though, where that also has a very slow bolt cycle. This does 60 crit damage on hit. This is one of those weapons that weirdly enough has half the crit damage as it does regular damage. I don't know why that is. Granted, if it had 120 base damage, it would just be a straight upgrade from something like the anti-material rifle in terms of just straight damage to damage comparisons. Wouldn't necessarily be the best at everything, just because of the way the weapons work and the way you might want to build your characters. But I do kind of understand lowering that, and 60 damage is still quite high for a crit. That's almost the same as the brush gun. This has a 2x crit modifier. That could also be the reason why it has less crit damage, because it does have a 2x crit modifier, so it's more likely to hit crits than other weapons. This one costs 40 action points to use. The Gauss rifles aren't that bad to be using in VATS, but they're also not necessarily the best. They're decent though. If you want to use them at medium range, they can still work really well. There are some other energy weapons that are better than this, but it can still work if you need to use it there. This has very low spread at 0.03. It is extremely accurate, as you would hope a weapon like this is. However, sometimes the Gauss rifle, and I don't know if it's just me, but it seems to kind of go off from where I would think that it would hit. I'm not sure why that is, and I doubt it's because of the spread. I don't know if it's just because it's how the Gauss rifle works, or maybe it's just because of the impact or something, that I just assume that it has more spread than it does, but it is very accurate overall. This does have a magazine of 5, however it only shoots 1 shot. It consumes all 5 cells when you fire this. So you can go through microfusion cells a little bit quick with this, although if you're just using this as your designated sniper rifle for an energy weapons build, you're probably not going to go through ammo very quickly with it. You're also probably not going to go through item health very quickly with it. This weighs 7 weight, which makes it very lightweight for how hard that it is. And this has 80 item health. Not a whole lot of item health, but since you're just firing this 1 shot at a time, you're probably not going to go through that health super quick, making it actually pretty decent for an energy weapon. And a lot of other energy weapons don't have very much more HP than this. Some of them have even less HP than this, and they're more like semi-auto weapons. So the Gauss rifle is okay in that regard. For the general pros of the Gauss rifle, this does really high damage. It just does. It hits extremely hard. It's one of the hardest hitting weapons in the entire game. There's very few weapons that can kind of compete for it, at least shot for shot. This has very long range as well, which is great. A lot of energy weapons do, but since this one comes with the scope, it is a little bit easier to hit at a longer range, at least in my opinion. And it also has really good ammo. The ammo is really nice for the Gauss rifle since it takes the microfusion cells, which are shared with basically every energy weapon rifle. So if you're using plasma or if you're using laser, you can also use the Gauss rifle with it. And even on top of that, you can make really good use of like the max cells with it, since you're probably not going to be using this weapon that much. Breaking your weapon faster doesn't necessarily matter that much if you're only using this 2 or 3 times per engagement, if that, assuming that the first shot doesn't just end the engagement right there. The cons to this are that it does have a slow rate of fire. Most of the sniper rifle type weapons like this generally have a slow rate of fire, and that's to kind of even out how much damage they do per shot, so you can do really fast follow-up shots with this. It's not terrible to be using at close range, but it's not going to be your best option for an energy weapon. You're probably going to have to buy a Gauss rifle from the Silver Rush or from the Brotherhood, since they're the most likely to sell it. You could potentially go to Old World Blues later on and take it off of the trauma harnesses. It can work really well there. And if you are taking these are one of the best weapons to take because they are so lightweight compared to the amount of money that you get from them, which is awesome. You could potentially kill the Brotherhood to get one of these, but that can be a little bit difficult since the Brotherhood are probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest faction in the game, at least person to person. Or you'll have to go for the unique version, which is technically locked behind a trait or not taking a trait. As for perks that can help out with the Gauss rifle, there's no real perk that specifically helps this one out. VATS perks could kind of help it out, or Pack Rat could kind of help it out just so that you could carry more ammo. Meltdown is the major one that I would say because it allows you to use this pretty much like a grenade launcher, or like how the anti-material rifle works with explosive rounds, where you can snipe something off and then potentially have this explode and deal damage to everything around it. And that works really well for clearing up small groups of enemies that don't have a whole lot of HP. So Meltdown is pretty awesome on this. It's not going to work as well against really big enemies, but it will work really well against the medium and small enemies. As for different ammo types, we have all the regular microfusion cells. So we have the standard microfusion cells, which give you regular damage, but do have some armor breaking on them. That's pretty nice. We've got bulk cells, which reduce the damage, but break your weapon slower. I wouldn't really recommend these for the Gauss rifle. The Gauss rifle doesn't really need it. If you're using it as a sniper rifle, you probably want higher damage on it. The overcharged cells can be pretty good. They give you more damage, break your weapon a bit quicker, but give you more armor penetration, so that's nice. Max cells are really nice with this since it gives you a lot more damage, breaks your weapon a lot quicker, but gives you even more armor piercing. So these ones are fantastic to be loading in the Gauss rifle. And then you also have the optimized cells, which is usually the ones that I use the most. These ones give you a little bit more damage, don't break your weapon quite as fast as the overcharged cells, and give you good armor pen. These ones are really nice as general purpose ones. Usually I'll try to use these in whatever main energy weapon I'm using, like whether it be the laser rifle or the LAER or whatever it might be. And then I'll switch to the max cells to put into my Gauss rifles. That way I do a whole bunch of damage with it. The Gauss rifle is a very solid weapon. And for an overall rating on my tier list, I'd put the Gauss rifle all the way up into S tier. Just the regular Gauss rifle is really good. It's basically the 50 cal for energy weapons, and it feels very much like that. It is fantastic to use. I love carrying this around on my energy weapon characters, and I've just never really been disappointed in the Gauss rifle. It also has just a really satisfying sound to it once you hit something with it. Let's move over to the unique version of the Gauss rifle, which is called the YCS-186 Gauss rifle. Now this one is a little bit different than a regular Gauss rifle, both in terms of look and feel. This one is related to a trait though. This one is related to the Wild Wasteland trait. And if you take the Wild Wasteland trait, then this locks you out of getting the YCS-186 Gauss rifle, unless you want to spawn it in with commands. In which case, then you could, but at that point you can spawn in anything with commands. The reason why this is locked out is because once you take Wild Wasteland, then the area where the alien blaster is, well, where the aliens are. So you can kill the aliens and get the alien blaster, but if you don't have Wild Wasteland, then that encounter does not happen in the Wasteland. Then it is just a group of mercenaries up at the north part of the map, and one of them has the YCS-186, which makes that particular mercenary very dangerous. That can kill you very quick. Gauss rifles by themselves can kill you quick, and the unique one does even more damage. So this one requires 75 energy weapons and 5 strength to wield, same as a regular Gauss rifle. This one does 140 damage per shot, so 20 more damage than a regular Gauss rifle. This one does 420 DPS, although again the DPS is probably lower in terms of practical use because you do have to reload this each time that you shoot it. This one has 70 crit damage, which is as much as a brush gun, so that's quite high. This one has a 2x crit modifier, more likely to hit crits, still costs 40 action points. This one has slightly better spread, but only slightly, where it has 0.0275 spread. Okay, it's about the same accuracy as the 0.03 that the regular Gauss rifle has. I don't know why they decided to make it so specific for this one. This one only holds 4 rounds in the magazine, so this one is more ammo efficient than a regular Gauss rifle, where usually it will be taking 5 cells. This one only takes 4, so your microfusion cells will go even further with this one, which is pretty nice. This one does weigh 1 additional weight at 8 weight, which still isn't very heavy. That's not a big deal at all. And this one does have more item health than a regular Gauss rifle at 100 even. Overall, the YCS-186 is just all around a better Gauss rifle. And so long as you don't have a problem with, well, just really wanting to take Wild Wasteland, then you can get it, and it's a fantastic weapon. So this one is also going to go all the way up into S tier. However, if you do like all the different wacky things that you can get with Wild Wasteland, by all means take that, and then you can take just a regular Gauss rifle as your go-to energy sniper, and it's also going to be really good. Energy weapons don't have a whole bunch of snipers. The Gauss rifle is one of them. I guess the laser rifle with a scope on it could be, which, yeah, that's pretty good too, and of course the Holo rifle is a fantastic weapon as well, but the Gauss rifle is a really, really cool weapon. Tell me your thoughts on the Gauss rifle and its unique variant down in the comments below. This one has been requested quite a bit. I do understand why. It is one of the coolest weapons in Fallout's history, I would say. It's been cool in basically every game, even though it's changed a lot throughout the games. Gauss rifle has been a very solid weapon. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so very much for watching it. I'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye, everyone.